our kids will naturally inherit all our bugbears, and we just need to be aware of that. So much of our lives can be determined by these unconscious forces that we're not even aware of, like other people's judgments, generational trauma that we pass on. And I think what we're trying to do in these conversations is to raise awareness that there is a choice in there that you can have, but it starts with intention and awareness, right?
There's not a linear path to stopping generational trauma. The decision to break a generational cycle, messy. There were a lot of tears, a lot of self-doubt. It's not clean. Anybody who is saying I'm going to change my life, it's messy, and it comes at a sacrifice. And you have to decide if it's worth it. And I think you have to be okay with the sacrifices you're willing to make to improve your life and break the next, in order to make the next generation better.
Welcome to the Motherhood Clinic, a podcast about caring for mothers after childbirth, led by clinical experience and real life stories. If you're a new mom and ever asked yourself, is what I'm going through normal? Should I be worried? Or who should I ask for help? This podcast is for you. It's for anyone navigating those early weeks, months, or even years after having a baby. Each episode brings together voices from across the motherhood journey, from clinicians, experts, and mothers from all walks of life. We're here to help you feel more empowered in your unique motherhood journey. We believe in a better start to motherhood.
So, welcome back, Kayla. It's great to have you on the Motherhood Clinic podcast. This is now episode 3 of our little mini trilogy, where we've been talking about your book as kind of the central theme, like don't be an Athena. And just as a quick recap for people that are tuning back in, episode 1 was about what happens when we judge other people. And that happens, we know we feel judged, and we also judge others at the individual level, and what happens when, we unintentionally victimize the people that are undergoing distress. Second, we then talked about what does that look like at a societal level, and sometimes when the system fails, how that then turns us into an Athena, or we kind of feel like the system is acting like an Athena to us, and we're being judged by the system. And then thirdly, for this conversation, what we wanted to do now is actually talk about how do we break that cycle. Your book, Don't Be an Athena, takes the Greek myth around Medusa and Athena, and the core theme is how that trauma is constantly passed on to everyone else that has subsequently suffered, and we do the same, and that parable like lives on in our own lives in reality. So this conversation, I think, is a really important one to look at. What does it take to not pass on that wound? Like, we keep hearing how the people that were bullied become the bullies, how the victims become the perpetrators. So this is a well-known affliction that affects us all. So today I want to use your experience, your knowledge, to really talk about that. So today we'll talk about how do we recognize unconscious trauma being passed down. Number 2, how do we interrupt the cycle, and use some examples from the book and people that you've spoken to. And then lastly, just think about some of the key take-homes for people. So I'm going to stop there. Kayla, I'd love for you maybe to give a bit of a scene set for this conversation about breaking the generational trauma, and then we'll lead into the discussion. So Kayla, over to you.
Great. I have so many women in my book that I interviewed that are prime examples of this, of just breaking the curse. So I interviewed my mother. My mother is Tammy in the book, and my grandparents, or my grandmothers, both on my father and my mother's side, were teen moms. My mom was a teen mom, and my mom was determined to break the cycle when everything was against her. And so I was almost 28 when I had my first daughter. So I broke that cycle, and it came from the sacrifices that my mom had made, and my mom recognizing, how do we break this cycle? How do we invest in the next generation and in the next future? But she's not
Mhm.
alone. I have another woman in my book named Toni, and Toni um, is Indigenous. She belongs to the Navajo Nation. She got pregnant at 15 years old. She has 3 children. And again, she had a lot of traumas that she had to undergo, and including childhood molestation and teen pregnancy, poverty, being abandoned by a partner, and just the human resilience. And she was determined to break the cycle. And to this day, she's single and is a mother and a grandmother. And her
Mm.
and she broke that cycle. It came at a lot of sacrifice, but she was able to do it. And not only this cycle of generational abuse and teen pregnancy, but I think this cycle of doing what society is expecting you to do. I have women, I feel Audrey in my book is a powerful story in that she was raised in a conservative, traditional household of, if you pray to God and you're a good girl, you're going to get the perfect husband and you're going to have the children and you're going to be in her household. That is a signal of having God's favor and being blessed. And so when she couldn't
Mm.
find a partner and motherhood was not going to be a reality, she had to re-envision what it means to be in love. And she fell in love with herself, and she fell in love
Mm.
with traveling. She was no longer holding herself back, because there's this perfect image of you get married and you and your spouse, you're traveling and you're creating these memories together. And so she is
Mm.
well educated. She decided to have 2 or 3 jobs, and she just saves money. She's been to Europe. She's will travel. She'll get in a car and do a road trip in the United States. I think she's planning another international trip.
Mm.
So she broke a societal generational expectation of, okay, this is what it means to be a woman. And the expectation is you receive your education, you get married, and you have children. Well, that narrative was not working for her. And so she had to find a way to redirect what it means to be a single woman and fall in love with herself and fall in love with her
Mm.
life as sans husband and children.
Yeah. No, those are all some really great stories that you're raising there, and I think that really is the power of stories, right? Real people stories, Kayla, that you've done justice to bring to life. Is, we see a cross section of generations and cultures where these same stories play out. So there is something to learn if this is happening to you. Um, and to find your story in other people's, and there's a level of solace in doing so.
Mhm.
So one question I had, you start with your mother, Tammy, who had this, and I wonder if were you able in the conversation to single out what was it? Was there a singular thing or things that helped them to break that generational trauma? Like, what was it that allowed your mother to do that maybe previous generations weren't able to do? What do you think that thing was?
I think it was a multiple factors that helped my mother break the generational cycle of teen pregnancy and poverty. And I think it stems
Mm.
from human resilience, but I think so many people judge my mother. My
Mm.
grandmother was, I mean, obviously my grandparents were quite upset about my mom being pregnant with me at such a young age. She was showing such promise when my mom was a teenager. I mean, she was the stereotypical
Mm.
all-American girl of,
Yeah.
she was a high-performing, talented student, and she got pregnant, and people, I think, were shocked that this young girl or this young woman could make such a decision. And then my father
Mm.
was I mean, he was emotionally abusive to my mother, and he didn't think my mother was going to succeed at all. And I think that was the driving force, was she felt like she disappointed my grandparents and she no longer wanted to be a disappointment. She had this mate
Mm.
who is my father that didn't think that she could accomplish anything. Um, she was a high school dropout, and she was just determined to prove to people that just because she started her life early didn't mean that success was unattainable. She could still be successful and be
Mm.
a young mom, and that's where she decided that she was going to break the cycle. She wanted a better life for my siblings and I, and she wasn't going to allow one decision to dictate the outcome of her life. So I think it was just the grit
Great.
and human
Yeah.
resilience, and she took the harsh criticism that she received from the public and turned it into this, uh, just this kind of this shield, this she became a warrior of, "I'm not gonna allow society to dictate what you're going to say about me."
Yeah. Good. That's great. Thank you, Kayla. And I'm interested in this question of resilience and where it comes from, because for our listeners, there may be people out there. It sounds like one, there's a turning point in, you've lived this life so far and you kind of had to keep eating all this rubbish that society and people throw your way. And it sounds like for your mum, there was a turning point and a decision where you're like, okay, I'm going to change this around and change the narrative and use that as fuel for my fire. Right. I want to speak to the people out there that haven't yet found that resilience or don't feel like they are resilient, and to feel like, where does that, this sounds like a great story and it is an inspiring one. So I think one thing is to get inspiration from people like your mother who are inspiring, and for yourself. But is there a question around, like, where can people find resilience if they're not feeling resilient, right? Where can they find that inner strength and to then begin on this journey? Because some people listening won't feel like that. Do you have any thoughts there, Kayla? Do you have any thoughts?
I'm thinking of my mother and these women and myself, and I think
Mm,
there's just this common denominator that they were not resilient the entire time.
mm,
And when you read my mother's
yeah.
story, that it's littered with mental illness, with high functioning anxiety and depression. She felt completely
Mm,
helpless. She was forced to marry my dad because uh, tradition forced
mm,
her to marry my dad. They didn't want me to be born out of wedlock because society deemed that as
mm,
being, um, unacceptable. But as you're reading, and nothing about her pregnancy went well, nothing about when she gave birth to me went
mm,
well, because I developed spinal meningitis when I was born. I was, in intensive care for 10 days. Then when we returned home, I was colic. So there was nothing easy about her journey into
mm,
parenthood. But I think
yeah.
after I was born and they came home, I think it's just this realization that how they were living was not working. And she felt so helpless on getting married, because getting married was the right decision. But I think there comes a point in time through the depression, through just going through the motions of everyday life, and realizing you do have a lot more control over your life than you realize. So even though she
That's
didn't
great.
decide to get
Mm,
pregnant, she decided to get the agency to file for divorce and realize, "I don't want to live this life anymore." And I don't
mm,
think
mm,
there's
mm,
a formula to when an individual arrives to that, because I felt,
mm,
because I had the opposite problem. I struggled with infertility, and again, I
mm,
had to reach to a moment where I just had closure over what was going on in my life, and I was tired of feeling angry.
mm,
And I remember seeing a quote once that said, "He who angers you controls you." And so I felt
mm.
like
Very
I
true.
was tired of
Very true.
having society control me, and you just reach,
Mm,
feel like this catalyst of letting go of, you're tired of being angry and you're tired of allowing people to control.
mm.
And it's quite cathartic of when you finally reach to that point and you're like, I want something different, and I have a lot more control than I realized.
That's great, Kayla. There's a lot of very big themes we're talking about here. Control, surrender, acceptance. Um, you know, and one thing the reason I asked the question I think you've done a really nice picture of painting is your mum wasn't always this resilient person. And I think often what we tend to do when we're in a bad place is we kind of put people on a pedestal thinking, oh, look at someone like Tammy, look how amazing she is. And we kind of see where she is now as opposed to the journey and the struggle she's taken to get there. So we always see the end product, we don't see the process. And what
Yes.
you've articulated in your mum's story has been the trials and tribulations that forced her to become that person, as opposed to she was always this resilient person. So I think it is the reason I labor the problem is to speak to someone that is feeling like that's not me right now. Look at these amazing women in Kayla's books. That's not never going to be me. It's like actually they were never that person to begin with, but it was a situation and the journey they went through to then become that person. So hopefully that is um, the hope and the inspiration, I think, for anyone going through a level of adversity, that this will hopefully shape you to become the person you need to be, right? So that's maybe a reflection as you speak about where does the resilience come from? Because it's such an interesting discussion. Like where do people find strength from? And it can be from so many different places, you know, because of or in spite of your situation. That's kind of been again part of my experience as well. And I also wanted to turn the conversation to when we think about this generational trauma and passing it on, and it's something that I was mindful of as a parent. Is what's that saying? All the issues that you've been through in your life, um, the greatest burden the child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. Was the
Uh-huh.
thing I wrote down by Carl Jung, and that was such a powerful thing. Or what's the modern day version? I'm gonna put a curse word in here, but there's a book called How Not to F Up Your Kids, right, by Wayne Lee, which is I guess the modern day equivalent of that nice sage saying I just did. But it is that because we do pass on all our issues and bugbears that we personally bear. We then either overcompensate for our kids or we try to minimize that for our kids. But either way is unbalanced, and we naturally pass that on in an either unintended way, and is trying to be aware of the things that we naturally pass on to other people or to our kids. That was kind of my thoughts as I was preparing for this conversation. Is like, our kids will naturally inherit all our bugbears, and we just need to be aware of that. Did you have any thoughts on that, Kayla?
I being a parent is so hard. And I
Yeah,
think I
yeah.
feel like I mess up on a daily basis. And I remind
Mm,
myself my kids are they're I mean, yes, their basic needs are met, but I try hard,
mm,
so hard for my children to have a childhood because it was something that was I'm not gonna say it was robbed of me. I have fond memories of my childhood. And when I reflect
mm,
on how my children live in comparison to my childhood and even my husband's childhood, because my husband, he didn't endure as I'm not gonna say he didn't endure as much as I did. I think his childhood we both grew up farming and we grew up in poverty in Southwest Missouri, so there
mm,
is a lot of similarities, and I think we both work hard at and I think it goes back to you of, like, sometimes we overcompensate, and,
mm,
like, I feel like our daughters, I mean, they're practically royalty in comparison to how we lived
mm.
growing up, and they
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
and they definitely have a much more privileged life than we did, and I
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it does make me think of if I had access to the same resources and the same type of lifestyle, like, would I be where I am today? Um, like,
Mm,
they're quicker because I didn't have to fight as much. Because my children's they're successful at young ages, and it just
mm.
it's hard to, like, how do you find that balance between building resilience in your children? They do need a struggle, and I think as a parent, it's so difficult to see your children struggle.
I agree. It reminds me of a conversation that I heard. Can't remember who it was. It might have been Jordan Peterson, and it was a really good question he put. It's like, do you want to have a safe kid or a strong kid?
Yes.
And it's kind of like a purposely like exploratory question. And the narrative that follows is you can't have a strong kid without a level of exposure to a level of danger, right? So if you're always and every parent's instinct is to keep the first thing is to keep their kids safe, of course, right? I mean, what kind of parent would you be if you didn't want to keep your
Yes.
kids safe? But if you're always protecting them, they will never learn to be strong, and that kind of always that kind of landed with me quite deeply. Now, I'm not going to let my kid run around with a knife and, at 5 years old and start running and just go camping by himself, right? But
Yes.
there's somewhere along that journey where there is a level of exposure that they have to learn for themselves. And within reason, I cannot always provide that safety because if I do, they will never learn to be strong. And you're precisely, the example you gave is precisely the adversity you went through without that safety net forced you or encouraged you or made you become strong. And then that then allows you therefore to be safe. Right. So that's kind of always something that I've kept in my mind as I think about how much do I, helicopter parent over my kids, right? And what the unintended impact is by keeping them too safe. But that's a very subjective line, like what's too safe, what's not safe enough, right? It's
Absolutely.
just it's a question for every parent, every mother to answer individually, and it's no bearing on anyone else. Like what my version of safe compared to someone else's is none of my business for them, right? And equally, nor is it for that mine, right? So that's kind of the me trying to reserve judgment over other people and also for myself to say, look, that's my decision as a parent, and that's um, my line of thought when I try to go through these things.
And sometimes life happens. Life just happens.
Mm,
It doesn't matter how hard you try to keep your children safe. We as humans are
mm,
not exempt from trauma. Every single one of us are going
mm.
to undergo some form of trauma and tragedy. That's just part of the human experience, unfortunately. Tragedy
Yeah.
struck my family this year. 2026 has been a trying year, and
Mm,
no amount of shielding was gonna protect my children from their grandmother passed away
mm,
in January, quite tragically, and the
mm,
way that she passed, it opened their eyes to the dark side of humanity, and I could not shield that. And so it
I'm
was
sorry to hear that, Kayla. Yeah.
learning how to navigate your kids' grief while you're also grieving is quite difficult.
Mm,
And then my
yeah.
grandmother, my kid's great-grandmother, she passed away in May suddenly. I mean, not as
Mm,
as their grandmother, my husband's mother. And so in a short period of time, 2 women who had played a pivotal role in my kid's life were all of a sudden gone. And the holidays are coming.
mm,
I know it's July, but, autumn is not that far away. With autumn, we have key holidays approaching, and so there's some anxiety coming because they're used to receiving
yeah.
holiday cards from their great-grandmother. They're used to receiving specific type of gifts at Christmas time, and that's now gonna be absent. And I think it's one of those that I've learned patience, and it's
Mm,
okay for your kids to grieve, and I can't protect that, but no amount
mm,
they were innocent girls who had a routine and had constant people in their
mm,
lives, and then overnight, they were gone, and I think that's the other thing of y sometimes you are forced to build resilience because life is going to happen, and you're completely out of control.
mm.
And it's a
Yeah, yeah.
feeling when you have no control over life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one again, I'm sorry to hear that. Um, but as you said, you're so right. Like the um, life happens, right? And I think um, it'll either force you to respond, or it will force you to relook at things, right? And I think it's what we're discussing here happens, unfortunately, and to all of us. But, it is a personal thing that everyone has to kind of get their head around in terms of how best to deal with that, right? And everyone finds their way through these things. Um, and I think, again, reflecting on the conversation we had in episodes 1 and 2, is that so much of our lives can be determined by these unconscious forces that we're not even aware of, like other people's judgments, generational trauma that we pass on. And I think what we're trying to do in these conversations, you and I, these past 3, is to raise awareness that, like, actually there is a choice in there that you can have, but it starts with intention and awareness, right? And to be aware of what it is that we are unintentionally doing, right?
100%. I think
Um,
it
yeah,
was when
yeah,
I was going through infertility, and I don't think I realized how toxic I was becoming, because when you
yeah,
and sometimes you're not aware of it because you're trying to suppress. I had people who were afraid to approach me to let me know that they were pregnant. I was bitter when people who I felt like weren't worthy of being pregnant became pregnant. And that I had
yeah,
to come to I had my own moment of I needed to release my own anger because these people were also out of
yeah,
control. So I had to release and find closure. And I think that there's just something, like
yeah,
you said before, there's something cathartic about just letting go and realizing you have a lot more
absolutely.
control than you realize. And you,
Uh,
back to where you said you have to make a conscious effort to say, it stops here.
yeah, there's that beautiful paradox of letting go to be in control, and I completely 100% believe that that is the reality. In order to feel in control, you have to let go, and it's such a a contradictory thought to get your head around, but I've lived that principle time and again, where the more you want to control something forcefully or intentionally, you just can't. It's like, what is it, grasping sand, right? And you just have to let go, and then all you realize, actually, this is kind of actually how it needs to be. But it's definitely an effort to do that, and it's not as easy as just like, yeah, I'll just let go. It's a real effort, as you've spoken about, Kayla. So that's very helpful, I think, to hear, in your own words. So I wonder if I wanted to kind of level up the conversation and bring it back to the book, and again, the tale about Medusa and Athena. And obviously, what I think you've done so well in the book is taken these specific analogies around, like, Medusa. The whole point is that, part of it is her being seen, like she can't be seen because she's this horrible monster that turned into stone. There's the idea of turning people to stone, which is stopping people in their tracks, which is something that you mentioned to me, and making them look, but then forcing that on again. And I just think there's a lot of wisdom that I think you've done to extract the parallels of that Greek mythology into what actually is, those lessons for what we're doing, and then those kind of those parallels of what we do, being seen, stopping people in their tracks, etc. So I wanted to give you an opportunity as well to kind of round out the conversation, Kayla, in terms of, I guess, maybe the key things that you'd want people to bear in mind from all the work that you've done and from all the experiences that you've seen and heard, and had yourself, in terms of what would be the key things that you'd want people to remember, or know about how to break the generational trauma that we pass on. What would you say?
One, there's not a linear path to stopping
Yeah,
generational trauma. There's not. And what works is, unlike, I feel like, unlike society that's dictating a specific narrative for individuals, the decision to break a generational cycle, um,
yeah,
messy. It's messy.
yeah,
I mean, there are a lot of tears, a lot of self-doubt.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
there's it, it it's not clean. And
yeah. It's true.
anybody
Very
who
true.
is saying I'm going to change my life. It's messy and it comes at a sacrifice. And you have to decide if the sacrifice is going to be worth it. And I know with a lot of individuals in my book who were former addicts and just want to do something different. Maybe that sacrifice is you no longer are going to spend time with family. The sacrifice is part of your family because they're toxic. Maybe the
Wow.
sacrifice
Okay.
is going to be friends because you're realizing that those friends are no longer, those friends are toxic. And I think you have to be okay with the sacrifices you're willing to make to improve your life and break the next in order to make the next generation better. And for that's different for everyone because a lot of these women in my book, they made that sacrifice. They had to sacrifice individuals who were once close to them or people who were quite pivotal in their lives and realized this isn't the type of life I want. And
Great.
that's a heavy price to pay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for kind of crystallizing that wisdom, Kayla. And I think maybe the only addition I would add to that is you're right, it is absolutely a and I think every mother or parent will appreciate just the sacrifice it takes to have a kid, right? You
Yes.
sacrifice almost everything. I know we did. Um, so that idea of sacrifice will be uh a very well-known entity, I think, in any parent or any mother's life to understand. But the addition I would make is obviously you're sacrificing something to gain something, and I think it's hopefully that is the 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 optimism or the hope, which is you're not just sacrificing for the sake of it. You're giving something up in order to gain something better. And I think is that's the turning point. That is the decision point for your mother or for someone going through the Tony or the people in your books. There was a mindful, intentional sacrifice for the hope of something better. And that I think is hopefully the nugget that people can jump into and say, yes, this is worth it. Because no one wants to do sacrifice for the sake of it. No one wants to choose
No.
pain, but you do it with the hope that this is leading you to a better place and to have an idea of what that is. So that I think is hopefully the message that lands with people going through adversity and that will have to choose sacrifice. I hope that is the inspiration to take that to
And
that
if
turn.
there's any hope, every single one of these women, when they chose to make that sacrifice, they are living full lives right now.
Mm,
I mean, they're some of them are grandmothers and their grandchildren are living completely different lives than their own children and then their own and in the way that their grandchildren are thriving. And sometimes that sacrifice is a marriage that's no longer working for you. And some women chose divorce and I know them now and they're doing so well. They're smiling and not just smiling, you can tell the difference. They're glowing. And
absolutely.
they're glowing and there's just this they lived, they survived it, they made the sacrifice and it goes back to what you were saying. You're making a sacrifice with the hope to have something better. And if you're wondering if there is going to be something better at the end of your sacrifice, every single woman in my book, the answer is yes.
Mm, mm. That's great, Kayla. And again, that is again when you have the luxury to zoom out and look back on things, that is what gives life its color and its texture. And I say that having gone through my own personal struggles, right? But it's only when looking back, you're like, actually, that's kind of maybe what I am today. Because what's that thing like? You can't have a great character without a level of struggle. I'm bastardizing that quote, but something that, that's what makes a good life. But anyway, I'll refrain from getting too philosophical, Kayla. But suffice to say, it's a very powerful book that you've written and an analogy that you've chosen to help architect what women go through and mothers and people in general go through when there is generational trauma. So I'd like to say thank you again for what you the stories that you've taken the time to write and to publish. um I'll allow you as we close out to obviously promote the work you're doing, And also to answer a question that I tend to give to most guests. So I'll drop that before I'd allow you to talk about where people can find more about you, Kayla. So the question we ask of many guests is, the motherhood clinic exists. Our goal is to give every mother a better start to motherhood. Um, but a better start can mean a lot of different things to many different people. So in your view, what does a better start to motherhood look like?
What I wished I knew when I entered motherhood was give yourself grace. You're probably doing better than
Hmm.
what you think. And don't be afraid to ask for help. When I had my
Mm,
first daughter, I felt I was a terrible mother when I needed help taking care of her.
mm,
My body was physically exhausted and
mm,
emotionally exhausted. And it's okay to let go and ask for help. And I think
mm,
that's the better start
mm,
is knowing your body is healing. And not just that, like your body is healing mind, body, and soul. Physically, you're healing, hormonally, you're healing. And then there's this brand new
mm,
life that you brought into your home. And there's going to be a transitional period, and it's
mm,
okay to ask for help. And that is something that I wished, and I did better with my second child, and I think, again, it probably went back to societal expectations of I was supposed to be a career woman and take care of my children through everything, and it's okay. You need a village
mm.
for a reason, and it's okay to hit the pause
Absolutely.
button and rest because what's good for your body is what's good for your child.
Excellent. Thank you, Kayla. I really appreciate that. So lastly, I'd like to just give you the opportunity to talk about where people can find you, about the book, where they can find the book, and anything else just to promote the work you're doing. But again, I'll leave it to you to give the honors.
So I am on Instagram. I believe it's at Branstetter 87. I'm on Facebook. I have both a personal and a public page, but I'm not on my public page a lot.
Mm,
Managing all your social media
mm.
accounts in addition to a full-time job and children.
Yeah, good.
So just send a friend request, and everything that's on
Perfect.
my personal page is tied to my book as well.
Perfect.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm
And
on
the book you can, yeah.
Yeah, and TikTok, and on the book, you can find, on my website, I have all the links. If you buy
Mm,
directly from my publisher, the book looks so nice. It will take longer to ship, but the quality of the book is great. I'm on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Walmart, and a few other links I think that my publisher had put. And, I don't know internationally, I think Amazon goes international. I'm not sure
they do.
about Barnes& and Noble. I'm assuming Walmart.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Amazon's everywhere. All
It
good
is.
retailers, let's put it that way. But that's great. And we'll put links in the description. But again, Kayla, thank you so much. This has been for me a very sombering, hopeful, and really interesting conversation. So again, thank you for this, and hopefully we can do that again.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Kayla.
Thank you.
Okay.